So let's now talk about human actions and how human mind operates and how it creates culture and civilization. So here we have some images of important thinkers, and the first one is here from the ancient world, Aristippus of Cyrene, and he believed that the reason for human action, something that creates the need to do something at all, is pleasure. He was a philosopher and the founder of hedonistic school. Hedonism means the pursuit of pleasure, and he believed that humans are motivated by pleasure. They seek pleasure. Two more philosophers, both from the 19th century, Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill, believed in the school of philosophy called utilitarianism. So they believed that the primary reason for any action is usefulness. So humans want to improve things in the material world, but also in the thinking process, in philosophy and morals and everything. So they are not so much motivated by pleasure, but they are motivated by usefulness. This is really, again, a philosophical question that we'll probably not be able to resolve during this short semester. But I would like to talk to you about one very famous example, the one you may know already from high school. That is the hierarchy of needs, the pyramid of needs, created by an American psychologist, Abraham Maslow. He was again working in the second half of the 20th century. He was a follower of the branch of psychology called psychoanalysis, something that we'll return to, and of course Sigmund Freud is very important here as the founder of this field of knowledge. Freud believed that people are motivated by unconscious drives, by instincts. They are not fully aware of what motivates them, but this is really the most important thing. His follower and student Alfred Adler believed that humans are motivated by the inferiority complex. They want to impress other people. They do not like to lose. They do not like to feel worse. So this is what motivates them. Here we have some more examples of theories, like what motivates people. There was a theory called Hormic psychology by William McDougall. He believed that there are some inborn, that is natural, psychological dispositions, that people are born with the capability for certain emotions, like fear, revulsion, wonder, anger, domination, submission, or tenderness. That everything that humans feel is a combination of these emotions. Some, like the followers of behaviorism, believe that it's simple, stimulus and response. People just react to whatever stimulates them. It's like animals. You can teach them to react to something. So with humans, it's just the same. What is interesting is that those early psychologists rarely concentrated their attention on healthy individuals. Dr. Freud treated patients with mental problems, with psychological problems, and generally the focus of attention for psychologists until the middle of the 20th century was in whatever can go wrong in human mind. Abraham Maslow was one of the first scholars to study not only mentally healthy, but mature and often successful individuals. So he was not interested in how children develop, like Freud, or he was not interested in all kinds of psychological problems. He wanted to understand what makes people mature, healthy, and successful. And he came up with this very, very famous triangular diagram called the hierarchy of needs. And as I said, you probably heard about it. If not, here we have some versions of this image. So we have two variants. One is the early variant from 1943, which consists of 5 levels. So the first level is the physiological needs. So something that's true for all living organisms. Humans, like all living organisms, need food, water, sleep, reproduction. So these are basic physiological needs. Then on the second level, when these needs are met, people look for the fulfillment of their needs of safety, which means physical safety, security. It could be being free from danger. It could be having minimum of property and resources to sustain themselves, having some kind of group or family to help them. So the need for personal safety and security. Then, as you can see, the needs get more and more psychological. The third level is the need of love and belonging. So it's not only to have the family, but to have good emotional relationships without this family. It's not only to have sex for reproduction, but to have intimacy and love with some special person. To have friends, to have good relationships with other people. So that's level 3. Level 4 is esteem, which means basically respect and recognition. So this is the respect of others and the respect by others. So it works both ways. It means that people get confidence, they have the sense of achievement, they grow in self-esteem. And these 4 levels, Maslow called the deficiency motivators. You really need to fulfill these basic needs to be a successful human being. If you do not have enough of them, this will motivate you. The lack of fulfillment of these deficiency motivators on the first 4 levels. The 5th level, which Maslow calls self-actualization, is what he believes the real reason of happiness and growth of a human being. So this is the achievement of spontaneity, creativity, morality, problem solving, acceptance of the world, being at peace with oneself and with others, some kind of philosophy of life, some kind of need to share with others. So as you can see, in the early years of his work, he just put all these things in one last 5th level, the pinnacle of the pyramid. Later in life, shortly before his death, he published an upgraded version in which the original 5th level is further divided into cognition, aesthetics, self-actualization and self-transcendence. So even within those higher needs, there is a little hierarchy. So first, people will seek knowledge according to Maslow. You do not have to agree. Then they will need beauty and things that are aesthetically pleasing. Then they will seek creativity and this self-fulfillment. And the new pinnacle, which he calls self-transcendence, is basically the need to share with other people of your experience, of your knowledge and wisdom of life. The one in the middle is a joke made by, I would say, very modern people who believe that Wi-Fi and the functioning battery are more important even than the physiological needs. I leave you with that. This is just something to indicate that perhaps these rules are not set in stone, and that perhaps these needs fluctuate in time, so from one generation to another. But we'll return to that. This is the basic hypothesis of what motivates people and how. The next thing, which I mentioned already, but I think it deserves to be seen in close-up, is the process of enculturation, that is, learning culture. Culture is not inborn. It needs to be learned. It needs to be learned through social interaction. That is called enculturation. And in the next slide you have a very simple table showing the difference between nature and nurture. So something that is inborn and something that is learned, something that is part of culture, basically. So what motivates, what generates the natural aspects of human life? It's of course genetics. So we all need food, we all need warmth or shelter, we all need sleep, we all need waste elimination from our body. We all, or almost all, there are some hypotheses that perhaps not everybody, but for the vast majority of people, mating behavior, so seeking a partner, is a natural, genetically motivated behavior. And also things like pregnancy and childbirth are part of nature. But if you look at the other side of the table, you will see how much culture has built on those natural things. So we have a natural need for food, but culture produced cooking and cuisine and different, regional dishes and food taboos. We are going to have a separate class on food culture, so you'll see. People need warmth and shelter, but culture produced clothing and fashion and housing, and people need sleep, but culture produced beds and let's say the ways that people sleep, the alarm clocks and such things. Waste elimination, of course, is a natural thing, but different types of toilets are not. They are cultural. So do you sit or do you squat on your toilet? Also, a huge section of culture is devoted to mating behavior. So sexual morality and marriage and all the laws and cultural regulations referring to courting and marriage and sexuality. Also, child rearing practices. So, of course, pregnancy and childbirth are natural, but the care for children and the expectations towards children and parents and other members of the family are cultural. We can ask here, what about things like beauty and love and knowledge, so more abstract things? Are they natural or are they part of the culture? And this is a question I will leave you with, so something you can think for yourself. Let's now look at the way that people learn culture. Of course, humans must learn from other humans. This is no other way. People are not born with all the knowledge they need. They must learn it. So, of course, you can teach an animal to do some tricks, but the animals will not teach other animals. Or at least it's very, very limited. So how do people learn? They learn through situational learning. So it could be experience, like you touch the fire and you will never touch it again. Or social learning from other members of the group. People learn through observational learning. It could be conscious or unconscious. Especially little children, they just observe and absorb knowledge without even wanting to. And there is cultural learning, which is based on human capacity to think symbolically. So people learn through symbols. This is a bit more complex, but the result is sharing experience, sharing values, memories, beliefs, symbols, all other elements of culture. There are some specific types of cultural transmission, like the memes. You all know memes. And you probably know that they are funny images with cats or, I don't know, some other funny things. But in fact, the concept of memes was created by Richard Dawkins, a biologist, evolutionary biologist, in the 1970s. And he proposed the concept of memes as cultural traits that are reproduced in a way similar to biological traits. So it's like the genes reproduce nature, the memes reproduce culture. Minimal units of cultural knowledge that spread like viruses. He compared them to viruses. So it's like, you know, the epidemic thing. It gets viral. This is where it comes from. Also, people learn from imitation. They imitate other people. Very often there are biases in cultural transmission. So it could be based on content. For example, a tasty recipe or an effective tool would be more likely to become more popular. It could be context-based bias. So, for example, conformity is such a context-based bias when people imitate the behavior of the majority in their group because they don't want to stick out. Also, prestige bias, imitating people respected as experts. So, at least traditionally, people looking for knowledge paid more attention to the opinions of experts in the field rather than some random people on the internet. I'm afraid it's changing now, but perhaps not entirely. So this is called the prestige bias in cultural transmission. So now a couple of sub-definitions or ways in which culture functions. So first of all, culture is shared. It refers to individuals as members of groups. It's not individual. Culture is integrated. It means it is a whole. You cannot take one element from the culture and understand it without a context. So if you take, I don't know, a historical shoe, it will tell you a lot about the historical moment in which it was produced. We'll talk about clothes culture later on. Culture is patterned. It means the beliefs, values, customs, and institutions are interrelated. So basically, I hope you see what I'm getting at. Culture is all-encompassing, integrated, patterned, but it's also selective. It means that every culture chooses from a very wide potential choice of human behaviors. So you do not have everything in all cultures. Like perhaps one type of, let's say, family relations will be more popular, will be more dominant. So every culture chooses something from all possible human behaviors. And also, it has been observed by anthropologists in the early 20th century, cultures are generally ethnocentric. It means that members of a given group, any group, believe that their culture is the best. They judge other behaviors by their own standards. This was something that created a lot of problems in the development of anthropology, in the study of foreign, especially so-called exotic cultures, because the scholars were biased by the fact that every culture, including the culture of the scholar, because you all belong to a culture. And people tend to think it's natural, it's kind of human nature, that their own culture is the best. If they try to overcome it, we are talking about cultural relativism. It means taking culture without the reference to one's own type of culture. Of course, 3 more slides. There is a difference between what people say they do and what they really do, and sometimes the difference between this ideal culture and the real culture is like the difference between Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde from an English Victorian novel, if you know it. So it could be very beautiful on the outside in what people say, and rather ugly on the inside in what people actually do. So they could be quite hypocritical. And 2 more things. There is a difference between individual people and populations. So individual people, of course, differ in their emotional and intellectual capabilities, but there is no evidence that genetic differences explain cultural variation. We can assume that all human populations have equivalent capacities for culture. So there are some universal traits. Of course, some of them are biological, like the fact that the fetus grows in the womb for 9 months and that infants are long dependent on their caregivers, and that humans do not have a mating season but are sexually active all year round, and that humans have a very complex brain, so they can use symbols, they can use tools, they can develop language, but the particular form of that language or symbols or tools can differ from one culture to another. But let me stress again, there is no evidence of any biological differences between human populations. Populations do not behave like individual people who can be very different. And of course, the last thing, culture is dynamic. Culture changes all the time. It never stays the same forever, and it kind of rarely stays the same for long. So people always search for better ways to do things, and in some cultures, like the Western culture, progress is a good thing in itself. It's kind of philosophically good, so it is encouraged. So, of course, not all modernization can bring a benefit for everybody. It can imply the cost, but people may be forced to accept the change if their society accepts it. So not all change is voluntary. But all change in humans and human societies, like with other animals, must adapt to the changes in their environment in order to survive. So everything flows, Pantarei, as Heraclitus said. So that's it. You can see the images on Moodle again if you wish. I strongly encourage you to do the self-evaluation test, and see you next week.